welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I thought I would come on here and do a questions and answers format because I haven't done one of those for a while, so I can cover all your questions that you have in relation to OCD. So anything you want to ask in relation to OCD, just put it down in the comments below. I've had a bit of a long day today. I've just been traveling back home, and I was on the plane and I was thinking to myself, I've got to get back on Instagram Lives and do more of them. I've been very busy, and so I haven't done as many, but I will be back in the next week doing a lot more of those, covering different subjects, covering questions and answers, all those things, so that all your OCD stuff gets answered. Because I know what it's like living with OCD. It pesters you all the time. It's chronic anxiety, chronic guilt, locked on in the background. And I know that feeling. I used to have it all the time, 24/7, always lingering there. I can remember every moment in my life in the past, what I can remember and think, was I anxious at that point? And I can pretty much remember each holiday, each restaurant, each time at any event. Was I anxious? What was I feeling like at that time? I can always remember it because it doesn't... When you have OCD, you understand this. If you don't have OCD, it's not so apparent. You can understand because you're kind of gauging in your head all the time with an imaginary thermometer how anxious you're feeling in that moment. And that's what you're doing. And so when you look back, you can easily see that because you can think, that time I was feeling about 30% anxiety. That time I was feeling the most anxious I've ever felt. So many different moments in our lives, we gauge how anxious we were at those times. And that's natural, the same as, because we're going to do that, but we're trying to give up that control and that testing because that's part of the cycle. But we are going to do it a bit naturally, the same as you will remember in your life the times where you were really drunk, how drunk you were at that party or that thing, if it's moments where you were really drunk, or the same as if you were really tired or really sick, like you had the flu or something. So you will remember these things. So that's how we tend to do it. I did a post here a couple of months ago talking about how whenever I used to go to the barbers and I used to sit there in the chair, I used to always think to myself, fucking hell, this barber's chair, I have been in here every time bloody anxious, all the time. And I haven't forgotten that, and I can remember that in every single occasion. So I'm obviously not getting better because every time I sit down in this chair, I'm still anxious. And so to me, that was always a sort of reminder of how bad I was feeling, because I used to get in there and think, God, I've had the same false memory, real event stuck on in here in this barbershop for the last 5 years. And so I could easily see it. I could easily remind myself in those moments, because it's easy to forget it a lot of the time. You get used to OCD there. And then in those moments, it really reminds you, I am still suffering because I can feel it there. Or maybe when somebody who hasn't asked you for a while says, how are you really doing? Especially when I ask people how they're doing when they're coming into me, then I often ask them that, when we start a conversation, we always naturally start with, hey, how are you? And then they say, I'm fine, how are you? Which is normally not true. So what I always do is always want to check and see exactly what they're feeling realistically. So I want to ask them, are you really feeling fine? Are you feeling great? Or are you just rolling along with what we tend to go along with in life? And then they say, no, actually, I'm feeling really bad, or I'm feeling a lot better than usual. Different things, especially with how OCD waxes and wanes. 1 minute you can be feeling great, 1 minute you feel like you haven't even got it, and another minute you feel like you've really got it, the worst you've had. And it can flick between that in moments. It's like a roller coaster of emotions with loads of peaks and troughs. Some of my best days followed my worst days and vice versa. It just goes like that. Now, let's have a look at some of these questions on here. Will it ever completely go away? Well, that's a reassurance question, because what would you do if I said, no, it's never going to go away ever? Well, you'd be thinking, okay, well, that's not great. That's not ideal. It's never going to go away. What can I do about that? You could choose to be very sad about that and think, God, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. Well, actually, if you think of a lot of diseases and a lot of situations that people get in, they do get told that. And they have to accept it and acknowledge it. And it might not have a nice outcome. So you get told you've got terminal cancer. It's not exactly a nice outcome. And you're certainly going to be thinking, well, it's not looking up from this point. However, we do change our perspective on things. So we can change our perspective so that we could accept it. We'd have to accept it. We could choose not to accept it, but that wouldn't really get us anywhere. So we'd have to sort of make peace with it and accept it and make the most out of that situation. Certainly a situation that wouldn't be ideal. We really wouldn't want that. But at the end of the day, even in that circumstance, none of us are getting out of this world alive. We're all dead in the not so distant future, all of us. So even if we did have a terminal disease, it wouldn't be any difference to what's going to happen to us anyway. So even in that moment, they can be at peace because they're in the same boat as all of us. A great quote I once read by somebody who had terminal illness. They said, well, everyone's got terminal illness. It's just I know when I'm going to die. And I thought, well, that's a great way of looking at it because actually life, it's coming to an end. So none of us are here forever and we have to remind ourselves of that. And that's a key point. And so when you think about that, when you're searching, am I going to get better? Am I going to get better? How did you get better? What did you do to get better? Am I just like you? Or will I get better just like the same as you? Or will I be different? And that's the checking game that's going on. Well, if I said no, what would you then do? Well, you just have to accept it and make peace with that. Wouldn't be ideal, but you could adjust to that. Wouldn't be ideal, but you could acknowledge it. Now, that situation is breaking the cycle. That constant chasing. Did you have this symptom? My symptom is like this. How long did it take you? What did you do exactly? Now, understandable. We want to recover. This account wouldn't be here if recovery wasn't possible. Wouldn't even state it. We'd say, well, it isn't possible or something like that, or only 50%. So it's obviously possible. But if you're chasing all the time to work out if it's definitely possible for you in every single angle, that is a reassurance compulsion. You're going to end up stuck. So you have to acknowledge it. Like, I'm always taking things to worst case scenario, but in a comfortable way where if I feel some health symptom, and I think, oh God, what's this? This could become a problem. I think, well, what's the worst this could be? Okay, what would I do with that? Well, there's not much I could do with it. Same as many OCD situations. Let's imagine the solipsism scenario that people fear. What if I'm alone in this world, all on my own, and everyone's robots or I can't connect with my loved ones? Well, what could I do? Nothing. Just have to live my life the same as if we were in a simulation. I just have to live my life. What would that be like? It'd be a bit uncomfortable because I'd want to connect. But most of the time, just like when we watch a movie with actors in it, we're not thinking they're actors. We're just enjoying the film. So I would enjoy the film too, and I'd get used to that. So it wouldn't be what I want it to be. I would want to connect where I wasn't in a simulation as the first preference. However, if I was in it, there's not much I could do, and most of the time I wouldn't notice it, and it wouldn't stop me from eating, exercising, going for a walk, seeing friends, seeing family, whatever brings you happiness, could still do it all. So not much would really change, but it would be a preference to have it the other way. But it wouldn't be a must where I was saying I have to have it just to exist in this moment to feel at peace. And then we get in a stuck cycle. If I stop ruminating, will the intrusive thoughts decrease? Yes, hopefully they should. Because if you cut some of the compulsions down, it should help reduce it. However, some of them will be automatic, as you'll see in some of our other YouTube videos talking about automatic compulsions in your head. They don't tend to go down until the fear comes down. So they will carry on, persisting a bit in the background. And they will come down as the fear comes down, as we dispute the irrational beliefs, as we do more exposure work, that kind of stuff will get under it. But it takes practice and takes time. It's not an overnight fix, as I often say on here. How do you help and support someone with OCD and it's affecting a relationship? Compassion. You've got to be compassionate and understanding as best you can. It's got to be a bit of a tough love format. You can't be too soft with OCD. It will run rings around you. If I was soft with OCD with the people I work with, it would run rings around me. And then I end up having to negotiate with OCD, who's calling the shots. So I don't want to go down that path. It's not a good avenue. So with you, you've got to be compassionate. You've got to have a tough love approach, because that is going to give you the best chances at supporting them with OCD, because it will help cut down compulsions. It will help push them forwards to do exposures. It will help them stop talking about OCD constantly. It will keep them motivated, whilst letting them know that someone understands them and somebody is there for them and loves them and is supporting them. So it's got it's good all around in that way. And that's the best approach to take it, because otherwise what happens is, if we don't do that, we very quickly get into a cycle of, oh, are you okay? Are you all right? How's your day today? Oh, sorry, can I help you with that compulsion? Oh, shall I do it for you so you can avoid it? All subtly, without saying those kinds of things, but we start to get into those traps. And OCD sufferers are very good at forcing reassurance when somebody is giving it to them. It's very easy. Asking the mum for reassurance over and over, and then the mum thinks, oh, I should just give it to them if it calms them down. Vicious cycle. So we have to watch out for that. Just going through these questions, scrolling down, having a look. I don't cover all the questions. I try and cover as many as I can. How long does it last? Well, we can't really, that's a sort of how long is a piece of string question, because everyone is different. Everyone's OCD experience is different. Everyone has different fears. Everyone has different backgrounds, environmental factors, all kinds of things that go on in their life. So we can't say that. It's like saying, if I bonk my hand on this door, how long is it going to take for the pain to go away? Well, it depends how hard I bonk it. It depends on how I view pain. It depends on if I've maybe had another injury. It depends on a lot of things. The OCD, in terms of the genetic format, not really a massive difference between people when it's in this sort of chronic format. It's almost about the same, I imagine, but it's just these different environmental factors, different low frustration tolerance, getting used to discomfort, and your knowledge that you're learning with OCD and all the work you're doing. So it's a mixture of all of that. Before I go to bed, I have to check my entire house. Every light switch, door, closet, under the beds, everything. What are you looking for? Monster in the house? Because that is where it kind of starts often as a kid, where we get into that habit of checking all around the house for like a monster or something scary. And then that becomes a habit. That's where it often starts from. Then as we're older, we've got used to thinking, so we think, to have sleep, to be at peace, I need to have everything right in my mind. Hence why sometimes when I get into bed, now, not when I'm suffering from, now I'm not suffering from OCD, I still do this because I'm a human. I get into bed and I start thinking of all the things that I put off. Have you done your accounts? Have you done some letter or something that you need to post that you've been putting off sending to someone, or you've forgotten to collect from the post office, or any thing that's just way down on your priority list, because you're trying to get every single thing in perfect position for you to go to sleep. And we do that. That's what we do as humans, and that's what you're doing there. But it obviously latches in the OCD cycle of, what if you don't do that, then you could die? What if you don't do that, someone else will die? What if you don't do that, you'll be anxious forever? What if you don't do that, you won't be comfortable now and you'll feel anxiety? Or whichever way it wants to get in and get your hook in and a latch, it's going to do that, because that's the nature of how it works, okay? So you are going to have to think about cutting those compulsions out and thinking, do its worst. I wouldn't do a compulsion, whatever it was screaming. You know, that's how you recover. It screams, you're going to die or someone's going to die. So what? I have to say, let them die or let me die. I'm not being held hostage. If somebody said to me, they said, right, you've got to do compulsions all your life, otherwise somebody dies. Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario here. There is no way I would do that. Unfortunately, somebody would die, because nobody deserves to be tortured for their whole life. That is the card that people forget with OCD. They forget that you're playing a game with OCD and it's holding you hostage. How can someone deserve to be tortured their whole life for some other thing? It's going to always up the stake and say, well, what happens if your mum dies? What if somebody dies? Who cares? Whatever it's saying, doesn't matter. You've got to allow that. Okay, maybe that happens. I'm not being tortured forever. That's the way out. You've got to do that. And that is a key point. Otherwise, people say to me all the time, oh, I've got to think this. Otherwise, a plane might crash, or otherwise, mum might get hurt. Screw it. It's got to happen. It's not being cold. It's not being harsh. It's reality. Human life, you can't spend your whole life suffering all day long because of something in your head that's holding you in a sort of judge and jury, guilty or innocent all day long. Can't live like that. It's a very tiring process. You end up stuck like that in that limbo all the time. It's not going to give up. So you've got to take it to that worst case scenario and say, fuck it. We'll let it happen. I'm being free. I'm not living like this. And you've got to take that attitude. You've got to take that. You've really got to do that. You've got to walk right into that fire in your head and say, screw it. I'm going for this. I'm coming out. And I'm not going on with this anymore. And that's a really key point. Rob, is the goal to be comfortable in being uncomfortable in every situation? Yes, it's about being comfortable in all situations, all feelings, all thoughts, all anything. You don't need to change that. That's all right, and that can be anxious too. It's all right to be anxious, even chronically anxious. It's not ideal. But as we get under those beliefs, as we come under them, as we dispute those irrational beliefs and get under it and change our perspective, then we won't be chronically anxious. But we're going to have to, in the short term, learn to get used to being more anxious. Because a large amount of the problem is people sort of refusing to be anxious. I don't want to be anxious anymore. I don't want to be guilty anymore. I just want rid of this now, and sort of throwing an internal sort of frustration of, I just got to get rid of this. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. I spent years in my teenage years wishing it away every day. Oh, why did I have this? How did this happen? Where's this come from? How's this even happened in my head? And all day, where was that getting me? That was an internal compulsion. That wasn't helping. So you can't do that. You've got to just leave that. You've got to go, if I feel shit, but I'm still going out. If I feel anxious and I feel guilty, so what? I'm going to learn to get more comfortable with this. That doesn't equal recovery. But what it ensures is that then you're not trying to get rid of it. So you're stopping that internal, really fast treading of water that you're doing to try and keep afloat all the time. And doing that is what's wearing you out. It's a fast internal work rate that's getting you nowhere. So you do need to cut that out. Another question, how long does it take to recover? If you watch this Instagram live back, you'll see that that's a common question. So, yeah, and I was just speaking about why I can't answer that and why that becomes a hindrance. So if you watch it back, you'll see about that. It's a really common question. It's one I used to do all the time myself because you desperately want to be free from anxiety. Facing your fears can be very scary, but the only way. You know what I tell people, and I have for over a decade? Facing your worst fear ain't as scary as not facing it and living your whole life behind it. Think about that. Whatever the fear is always illusion. How do we know that? Because there's someone who's not scared of it. There's someone who's not scared of it. Whatever. Death. There's people who are not scared of it. Most people tend to be a bit scared, but there are people who are not scared of it. Some people have had operation after operation, had diseases waxing and waning for over a decade. People like living like that. They're not scared of death, some of those. As people have gone out on the battlefield and nearly been killed many, many times. They're not scared of it. They're probably a little bit scared of it, but they've got used to it over time, and it's just become a way of life for them. So things that, think of anything. What about going to prison for 40 years? There's people in prison for 40 years. They're reading a book right now. They're in there 40 years. They're in there on death row. They've been on death row for 20 years. They're reading a book right now. Their heart rate's not high. They're sitting there. They're at peace. They've accepted it. Whatever the situation, it's your perspective. But you have to really anchor into that and remind yourself, because if you don't, you stay stuck because you keep thinking, Oh, this case is different. This story is different. Mine's a different situation. If only I hadn't had this happen. Oh, if only da 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 da. And, you know, that is a never-ending cycle. It can always be like that. In a video, you say, and I've said this tonight, if something bad happens, let it happen, even if this costs your life. Isn't it exaggerated to say this? No, I just said it again today. It's one of the most important things in OCD recovery. You have got to be able to let OCD scream anything, whether it's your life, your mum's life, your kid's life, whatever. You've got to take the uncertain risk of that. You know, you've got to be able to go, I can have that thought, I can think that about anyone, there could be a risk of that, a possibility of that. People get in the car every day and drive down a motorway with their family. That car could crash, it could get involved in a very nasty collision, and we could be trapped inside of it with it on fire, watching our loved ones burn to death. That is a fact of life. That is reality. But we don't think about that because we're so used to doing that. We think about the other things that we don't focus on. So we're pretty good overall at living with uncertainty and getting used to it. But we're also pretty good at focusing and fixating on the things that are scary, that are new, and thinking, God, this needs extra concern, or this is a new thing because it was an intrusive thought that came out of nowhere when I was doing such and such. And that gets us into a cycle of constantly trying to run from that new thing. Whereas in reality, we're around risk all the time. When you were a kid, you didn't give a damn about what pain you felt in your stomach or your heart. You'd have thought it was fun, and you'd have shown off to your mum, look, I've got this weird pain. And she'd have thought, bloody hell, that might be quite a serious thing. I used to do it specifically with things like being bitten by an insect in the garden. And then I used to get a big lump on my arm. I used to show mum, look at this. Now that could have got an infection or something, but I thought it was funny because I didn't know. Right? And as you left it to uncertainty, you still knew that things could be dangerous. Like you weren't going to ride your bicycle into a wall. So you did know that things were dangerous, but you lived with the uncertainty of it. You lived with the risk of it. And that's the problem. It's this trying to bolt down certainty and have it all secure. That's what people get stuck with. And that's what's happening all the time with OCD. People think they need this level of certainty, that the OCD has lured them into a trap of believing that they need to get answered and don't need that certainty. It's an illusion. If you needed it, everyone would have to have it to recover. And I'd be sitting here measuring all the bits of certainty I have. Do I have that? Because I can't be happy if I don't have this part and this part and this part. Wouldn't get anywhere. So we have to think about getting comfortable with uncertainty, getting comfortable being uncomfortable with anxiety, frustration, any kind of feeling or thought, whatever it is. And OCD sufferers will zoom in at that 100 miles an hour. Oh, but now I'm accepting of that. Now I'm depressed about this, or I'm sad about that. No, that's because then often what happens is people are scared of being sad, scared of being depressed. Of course, they could be depressed or sad about something, but I'm talking about in this perspective of when you start breaking down OCD fears, you will find that you're zoomed so into your emotions that you're concerned that you cry too much, concerned that you're too anxious, concerned that you're not concerned enough, concerned that in the past you weren't concerned enough when something came along that should have concerned you. It's like a tongue twister, but that's the reality of it. That's what people do. It's that constant measuring, like I just started this Instagram live today. It's that constant measuring with an imaginary thermometer in your head of how you're feeling every moment and how you felt in the past, way back 10 years ago. How are you feeling? That's what it does. It goes, what were you like when you were 14? Were you feeling enough when that person told you this or your mum told you that? How the bloody hell are you going to know that? But OCD expects you to know it. And it says if you don't know it, I'm going to give you chronic anxiety and chronic guilt constantly. It's a complete trap and it's easy to fall into it. I fell into it for years. So it's about being very, very aware of that. Now, let's have a look through some of these questions. A lot of questions today. I'm not going to be able to get through all these. I'll try. Let's have a look. A lot of questions about BDD. We're going to be doing a lot more videos about that because it overlaps a lot with OCD. You will see that with OCD and BDD, they're so intertwined and people get lost. They go and think they've got another disorder or something. I used to measure myself down to the centimetre. So I used to stand there, not to centimetre, we all measure ourselves to centimetres, to the millimetre. And I used to stand there 16, 17 thinking, if I grow any taller, I'm going to be too tall and too skinny and I don't want to be that. And so I'd measure myself all the time. Then I would compare myself to other people's heights, look up all different celebrity heights, which height were they, and then looking at that all the time. Because I believe when I was that age, I was into weight training. I didn't want to be sort of tall and skinny. I wanted to be muscular. So I had sort of an ideal height where I wanted to be. And if I kept growing, I was frustrated because I thought I'd be pulled away from my goals. But I didn't know this was OCD at that time trying to get in. It was trying to sabotage me then. And I had no idea it was doing that because I didn't know the word OCD till a lot later. And when I used to stand there and I used to measure myself, this became completely compulsive. I had written down all the different celebrity heights. Oh, this one's that height, this one's that height. Okay, so as long as you don't grow that much more, and if you do some weights, you'll stunt your growth, so you'll be the height you want. Completely ridiculous, compulsive cycle that I was stuck in because I was so scared of going, because it was out of my control. I didn't know how tall I would grow. And that sounds absolutely mad when you look back at it, but it's so understandable when you understand OCD. OCD by nature is going to make you think that you are losing control, that you're in some danger, some risk, that if you don't sort out now, everything's going to fall apart. And that's exactly what happens. And it happened with me in that area, happened with me with weight, happened with me with looking at my face from different angles. It does that. OCD can make you or your partner look as ugly as it wants to make it. That's another common one. What if my partner's really ugly and I didn't realize, and then it will make her look as hideous as possible? It does that. It's so good at mimicking. If it can make somebody who's straight think they're gay within one day, or they're trans, or they're killed someone, or whatever, think about how good it can mimic it. It will make it feel as real as it can get. That's the nature of it. It's going to make it as real as it can get. And you have to remember that, because people will always come and say, but mine's different because of this, or mine's different because it feels like this. It isn't different because it feels like this. That is how it feels. It feels as real as it can get. You can't tell the difference. There's no way to do that. Otherwise, I'd have a formula. I'd say, someone ring up, they'd say, okay, I've got a gay OCD. I'd say, right, well, is this correct? Is this correct? Is this correct? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? All right, all of that okay? Well, you haven't got it then. Oh, thanks, complete peace. It doesn't work like that. You can't tell an OCD sufferer in any way to prove to them it definitely didn't happen, because they will always find a way around that. We know that because of its very nature. People come into me, they say they're a virgin. They say last night, say a girl will come in, she's 18 years old, she's a virgin, and she's convinced she got HIV. And I say, well, how did you get HIV? And she says, well, I think I walked out the house and had sex with someone who was HIV positive. And she knows it's ridiculous. She knows it's absolutely ridiculous scenario. But that doesn't mean it unlatches. It latches, and it's latched, and she's aware of it, and she kind of partly believes it and partly doesn't. It does that. It does everything you can imagine, every crazy thought. I remember for myself, when I was about 19 and I was really in the OCD cycle, I was completely locked in at that time, and I didn't know what was going on. I remember how absurd it got. One time I walked into a bar, I sat down to drink a pint. The bar didn't even have many people in it. There was about 3 or 4 people in there. And I sat down, and this homeless guy walked in, spoke to someone at the bar and walked out. And I thought he had somehow poisoned the drink to give me HIV. That, looking back, I think, well, how ridiculous is that? How did that actually happen? Because I was creating an association with people that were homeless, could be a drug user, could have HIV, but then it created the OCD, a link between him to the drink. And you can't even get it from a drink. Absolutely ridiculous. That's what OCD will do. It will pick scenarios that are so out there, and it will just create links and latch through. And so only when you look back at it, and when you're in it, you think, oh no, this one's different. This one isn't OCD. All those other ones were, because that's what it feels like when it's latched, and when it's not latched, it feels very different. Right, let's have a look at some of these. A lot of these questions are very general and they are covered on our YouTube channel. So if you go on there, you can see a lot of the answers to loads of these, because the guys that are on there, the mods from the Facebook group, they cover these in great detail. Kirsty has covered a lot of these ones about the recovery journey in quite a lot of detail, and Nick has also covered quite a lot of those, the ones that have just been asked, where I'm up to so far. So if you have a look on there, you will see the answers to that. Looking for a monster at home when I was a kid. That happened to me. I don't know, that could be beginning of OCD. Look, it's not beginning of all kids scared of, a lot of kids scared of monsters. They think there's a monster there, okay? Doesn't mean they're going to have OCD. And it doesn't mean that's where OCD starts. It doesn't. But that little cycle can be where it builds up. It's like, for example, if I look back in my life, I can see where OCD had its grip. When I used to go to church, I used to say in my head, fuck, fuck, fuck. And I used to think, what the hell am I doing this in church? This is the house of God. I should not be doing this. And then I used to feel very guilty. But I didn't realize at the time you can't stop thoughts. And so then I learned to, I avoided it. I didn't want to go to church, but my mum made me go to church and I went there, and it never really got a chronic latching in there until later, because it was based on a situation, not based on a sort of chronic format which it could lock into all the time. So it was completely latched in those situations where I could avoid at that time, or could get around. I used to have it around sleep. I used to get a lot of them around sleep, but then they disappeared because sleep-related ones, they sort of came and went. So again, they weren't chronic, but it was at 17 when I got HIV-related OCD. I couldn't get that one out of my mind. It was chronically latched. It would not release. It was locked on. And that made a huge, that changed everything. Because then suddenly that was like, there was no way out. And plus the anxiety I was feeling was up to here. It was not giving me a break. So that's a really important thing to remember, is we can see it backwards, we can see it in places, but it doesn't mean that's the cause of it, because plenty of children go through similar things or similar events and they don't go through that. Those things don't cause it. Same as people come into me at 30, 40 years old, and they may have been in their job and seen something scary. Maybe they work in the police, or they were in the army, or in fire brigade or nurse, and suddenly OCD starts out of nowhere. It can just happen for random reasons. Maybe one panic attack, maybe being very tired and stressed, maybe seeing something, all kinds of things. But it doesn't latch. That's not what causes it. It's most likely got a genetic component, although the science is out on that. But there is most likely a genetic component under there which has fueled that. Now let's have a look here. How far is too far with ERP? This is a question that gets asked all the time. What's the worst that can happen? You get anxious. You get more anxious than usual. I mean, that's not going to kill you. That's the problem. People put things off. They think, oh, I won't do that because it might damage me. It's not going to damage you. The worst that can happen is you feel more anxious. I've done thousands of exposures, shame attacks, all the things you can imagine of scary scenarios that I built over the years to change my perception on the way I see life. I did lots of Albert Ellis's shame attacks, and some of those I made some quite scary ones for myself, and none of them killed me. They made me feel very anxious at the time, but they really helped in getting me to understand unconditional self-acceptance and to see that shame wasn't going to kill me. So these things don't kill you. These things don't make you worse. All that will happen is you might feel a bit more anxious, but you want to build up in a hierarchy instead of sort of throwing yourself completely in the deep end. What's your zodiac sign? Star signs and OCD recovery, we don't need to go into star signs. Last time, actually, somebody asked me on here, what's your zodiac sign? I gave the exact same answer, saying we don't need to go into it. Then I said I'm a Leo, and then all the comments said exactly the kind of thing a Leo would say. So it became a bit of a running joke. So yeah, I am a Leo, but I don't believe in star signs. But it's a slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope with those kind of things. A couple of the ones that I'm not a fan of. Star signs, law of attraction. That is a nightmare for people with OCD. Real slippery slope. And then people think, oh, if I have bad thoughts, then I'm going to have a negative life. That isn't going to give you a negative life. If that was the case, anyone who ever got depressed would have a negative life forever. It doesn't work like that. You can't think good thoughts and cure yourself from things. It doesn't work like that. But law of attraction, the idea that the universe is going to give you what you want, I don't believe that in the slightest. Science obviously demonstrates that's not reality. It can help you in terms of forming a positive direction. If you work really hard, you're persistent with your work, you're really going ahead, you're more likely to succeed, but it doesn't guarantee it. Same as you have children in Africa that have got terrible diseases, they can wish all they want and ask the universe all they want, they're not going to get cured. So it's not as simplistic as that. The other thing is fortune tellers. People with OCD often go to loads of those. Oh, I just need to get reassurance. I just need to find out that didn't happen, or I just need to go into my past. Nightmare. That can also be a slippery slope with hypnotists wanting to work out exactly what happened in the past. I wanted to do that in the beginning because I thought maybe there was something in the past that I've missed that's led to all this. And so that was a part of it too. Or can I review a false memory, real event from the past and have the hypnotist make me forget that thing? So all versions of that. Right, let's have a look. There's a lot of questions today, so I'm going to... Zodiac sign, been asked that quite a lot of times. Hope that's now answered that. Let's have a look here. Can you please save this video? Yes, I'm going to be putting it on YouTube. I always do. Hopefully the battery doesn't run out on this phone. So I will be ending this shortly, so I'll make sure it is saved. Will you do a video on sexual related OCD themes? I will be, and I have already done a lot of those. And there's great ones by Oliver on the YouTube channel, talking all about POCD and harm OCD, his personal experience with that, which will be a good one for you to have a look at, especially with all the chronic guilt that's latched on in the background. Right, I think I'm going to cover the rest of these questions in the next Instagram Live. I'll be up here in the next couple of days covering all the different questions and answers again. So in 3 or 4 days, I'll be back on here so you can ask everything then. And I will put this now up on YouTube so you can watch it back if there's anything you missed. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Take it easy. See you guys.